Let me quickly introduce myself. I'm Sunny Gupta. I'm a senior director at Viacom 18. For those of you who don't know, we also run JioCinema, which is one of the fastest growing OTT platforms in the country, right? We've had the chance to host IPL 2 times. One just concluded. And before that, I have spent about 4 years at this SaaS company called Atlassian as an engineering manager. And before that, I was with multiple startups. My friends know me as this front-end wala. I spent some time doing JavaScript in and out, right? And I'm really passionate about front-end JavaScript, the web ecosystem. These days, I'm lucky enough to be managing teams which also work on Android, iOS, mobiles, some backend and stuff. So I now have a wider sense of understanding of the ecosystem when it comes to developing apps, right? Today I wanted to talk about some things that a lot of us have heard about, right? Karthik did mention that a lot of words we hear about and we start assuming we know a lot about them. I'll just reintroduce you to some of those concepts. So before I start, I want to do a quick audience check. I want to know how many of you all are SaaS founders here? All right, a bunch of you. Non-SaaS founders? Just founders? All right. Developers? All right. And students, any? Wow, not one hand. I thought all entrepreneurs used to claim that they are lifelong learners. So let me repeat this again. How many of you all are students? All right, so with that, I believe in lifelong learning. And so we start with where we started from, right? I started developing when I was 12, 2002, right? I'm dating myself, yes. But we saw, some really amazing small libraries come out, right? Things like jQuery, frameworks like Bootstrap. I don't know how many of you all have had the chance to develop websites, and portals using these tools, but they were game changers, right? Before that, the lives of developers used to be having to kink out browser quirks, right? I don't know, I'm sorry, Microsoft, but Internet Explorer was the biggest pain for me, at least when I was a kid, and trying to code, not for money, just for fun, right? But jQuery became a game changer. jQuery allowed you to focus on your business, right? Tell the browser what to do, and jQuery would then internally, change the code to make sure it works across these browsers, right? Cross browser compatibility for your own code, right? Then came ES6 Plus. I mean, I call it ES6 Plus because everything after that kind of was a very standardized, and most modern browsers now support it, right? So there was a phase in between when I was developing websites purely using vanilla JavaScript, right? Which is to say, we started now relying on the plain JavaScript language itself, right? One of the biggest advantages was that you did not have to do any more hacks, etc., right? But one of the biggest cons of having to do vanilla JavaScript was that as your website became or portal or whatever application you were building, as it became more and more complex, you had to write a lot more stuff, and you wanted to implement the same things over and over again. So in case you're doing a website and somebody else is doing a website, all of us have to implement certain amount of code in our code bases, right? Which we call as boilerplate code. Do you all know what boilerplate code is, right? So boilerplate code is what used to take up a lot of time, right? And any new advancement in those underlying techniques would require every developer to go and update it in their own code bases. What we then saw was stuff like Angular come up saying, hey, you know what? I know every time you try to enter something here, you want it to reflect there, and you're writing two-way binding each and every time. Let me take care of that, right? And then Angular started becoming really popular. How many of you all are still dependent on Angular? Anybody? All right. A couple. Interesting. And how many of you all use React? Okay, the larger room. So React did come along, said, hey, you know what? Angular has been asking us to do things a certain way, well and good. It is working well for us. But sometimes some developers have their own opinions. You want to code in a certain way, right? And so React said, I will be just a library. I am not your framework. I will come in, give you tools, use them the way you want to. I will help you avoid a lot of boilerplate code, but you will have to do your own bindings, bring your own smaller tools and stuff, right? This is a journey most of us are aware of, right? This is what most front-end developers probably understand. You might have started maybe at ES6 during the Vanilla.js boom, or maybe even before jQuery. I don't know. That was a nightmare to live in. But today I want you to talk. I want to talk about a bit further and things that most front-end developers do not probably think about every day. But as founders, it is your responsibility to help them think about all of these headers that we're going to talk about today. It will make your product stand out. It will make your product bring in more dollars. I mean, that's what all of you want, right? So let's go ahead. The first thing that I want to recommend is for all of you all to make sure you have a coherent design system. Make sure you talk to your developers and see if you all have a coherent design system. What I mean by coherent is that almost everybody has a design system. Every developer, the moment you go and ask, hey, do we have a design system? Oh, yes, we have a design system. Everybody thinks that it's just about building these components, right? The moment you have 5 or 10 components, you feel you have a design system, right? But a coherent design system is so much more than that. Make your product, sometimes it might just be you, but make your product manager and designers and engineers sit together. Think about a bunch of things. Is my design system responsive? Do I have to use 2 different components every time I resize my website, for that matter? While I am taking web as my base to explain things, sometimes all of these things are going to be applicable in your Android or iOS apps as well, right? So I want to make sure your components are not just built for a single page, but you look at all of your pages together, identify key reusable components, take them out. There are tools like Storybook. I don't know if there are newer tools which are doing better, but I am a fan of Storybook. You make sure you put all of them together there and then test it out on different dimensions. Test out how do these work, etc. And the moment you do that, the moment your design system plays well with itself is when your developers are going to be more productive. Your developers will not have to think 10 times, oh, this hack, that hack, etc., right? And the moment your product manager has an ask that is not currently supported by your design system, make sure you spend time in adding the relevant components to your system. Maybe today you might have to do a hack, but please give them some time, maybe next quarter, to make sure they standardize it again. Otherwise, you're just waiting for the catastrophe to happen, right? Next. All right. Next, I want to talk about something that is really close to heart. While at Atlassian, I went through a training, and that is where a big paradigm shift happened in my mind. Whereas, who do you all think of when we call out accessibility? Whenever you hear, hey, we should be implementing accessibility, what do you all think? Visually impaired folks, right? People maybe with some disabilities, etc., right? You know what? All of you all are eligible to reap the benefits of accessibility. A lot of people do not think about this. I have 2 kids. One is just a year old now. The other one is 2.5 years. Sometimes I may have one kid with me in my arms, right? And I may be trying to do something, right? If the website was responsive, if the website supported keyboard navigation, I would still be able to use it and get my work done. I am disabled for that duration. This is something I learned while at that conference and attended that. It was a game changer. And that's when I realized somebody driving, right? And trying to understand, I do not support people driving and trying to do things, right? But what if, a lot of people talk about, hey, listen to podcasts while you drive. I listen to songs when I drive, right? Maybe there's something important that I want to just listen, understand, right? If that could support a screen reader, I don't have to look anywhere else. I could be concentrating here and doing my things, right? A small mobile device on a train, right, is probably a better example to give. If there is motion, you don't want to be reading and straining your eyes. Just pop in a headphones and listen to what the website has to say, right? While all of your PDFs and ebooks, etc., work well, your website could potentially work well, and that unlocks certain segments as well, right? Also, I mean, it also has become a legal requirement now with the governments taking a lot of steps towards the enabling digitization across multiple things. That is where obviously it does help out people with real disabilities. I would say do not think of this just for disabilities. Make sure you understand what all it entails, right? So it is all of us, right? And the second part is internationalization. Again, really important. This comes up once we have raised some funds. Maybe we think, oh, right now let me build for India, or right now let me build for US, or only for English-speaking countries, right? And I will target the other nations later, right? That is a very common example that we hear. Your design system could incorporate an RTL design. Look it up if you haven't already. RTL is right to left, which basically enables you to reach out a really large portion of the globe, right? This, if done at the start, you do not have to spend time building this website on day one. Yes, go ahead and explore sales and all of those things later in those countries. Your investment in technology today could, in a way, unlock these future opportunities much earlier, right? So you do not have to spend time rewriting your entire website. I don't know how many of you all have had to rewrite your website after you raised some funds. Anybody? I see 1, 2, 3. Yeah. So what happens is a bunch of these things, and you don't rewrite it once. You rewrite it every time you learn something new. My advice is to try and figure out what are these things that people spend time rewriting for. Go talk to other founders and you will realize there are so many things that we haven't even thought of yet. This is just an attempt to give you some ideas and to make sure you are future ready. Another thing that you should definitely do is all of the strings that are there in your website, make sure they are variables, right? Again, sometimes people spend a quarter rewriting their website to make sure they can now translate to other languages, right? Obviously, AI is going to help you do this much faster. But again, having thought about it before you make the website or while you are making the website enables these things much faster whenever you decide to do so. The moment you raise funds is the moment when the clock starts ticking. You have another deadline, you have another goal that you need to hit ASAP, right? All right, again, I'll just change gears a bit. Let's come back to front-end engineering. How many of you all know or have used server-side rendered pages, as in Java was used to render your entire HTML? Yeah? That server-side rendered is different from the modern-day server-side rendered pages. All right? So these days, with the advent of single-page applications, this is not something I want to teach anybody. I'm sure everybody understands that client-side rendered pages are here to stay. Right? They help you offload a lot of your computational power from your servers to these powerful client devices. All of our devices today are really powerful, right? These are mini machines. I mean, I would say mega machines. I had a computer at home back in the day, which had nothing on the phones that I have today, right? So make sure you think about SEO from the start. Again, this is something a lot of people tend to spend marketing dollars and are like, hey, I just want my website to work. I'll bring customers from anywhere, right? I'll do this marketing. I'll spend on Facebook. I'll do Google, right? And customers will come, right? Let's just make sure the features and everything is there. My advice is make sure you think about SEO. And when you think about SEO, do not try to overcomplicate SEO. A lot of you have overcomplicated SEO, right? This is front end. I want to talk about SEO in depth. Let me quickly understand how many of you all have spent dollars maybe talking to a consultant about search engine optimization. Anybody? One person. Interesting. So how are the others doing their search engine optimizations? In-house? All right. One thing that I recommend anybody trying to do SEO is, remember, you do not need to search for hacks to rank #1 on Google. The biggest hack is to have a website that works well, works fast, and make sure it takes the minimum amount of time to get loaded, right? That's all. Google is not trying to hide the secret. Google has always said, make sure your website is usable. How does it even know if it is usable or not, right? If there are two websites serving the same content or similar content, and Google needs to decide, if you were Google, what would you do? I would simply choose the website which was looking better. How does Google decide looking better? Well, I am able to click on it and it loads as soon as possible. The faster one wins, obviously, right? The one where people spend more time wins. A lot of us learned long ago that add some silly keywords in your meta tags. Anyways, it is not visible to your users. This will end, Google will send you traffic, etc. Google realized people were doing it, so it now also tries and calculates the amount of time, the engagement that you drive from your visitors, right? So if you even end up getting visitors the wrong way by probably adding fake keyword tags, etc., what ends up happening is Google will see somebody came, hey, I clicked on a Porsche ad, I came here and now all I'm seeing is some other stuff. The person would immediately close the tab, which basically tells you that Google now knows, well, it also controls your browser, so it can easily detect how much time a person has spent. All of these signals are still used to track and rank websites, right? So make sure you look at something called as Lighthouse and Web Page Test. Most of you all would have used it. If you haven't, please go and check your website score. The moment you do that, there are going to be a lot of surprises, right? We all think our website works well. Most of us have, I am assuming, 100 MB plus broadband with ourselves. We live in Bengaluru, most of us. So we also have 5G. I mean, whatever city you live in, you all have 5Gs, right? There is still this larger portion of the world that does not have high-speed internet. And for them, your website may actually not work as well as you feel, right? So make sure you do those things, right? It is not a competition between server-side rendered pages and client-side rendered pages. Make sure that when Google or a search bot is trying to visit your website, you are able to deliver a server-side rendered page, which would be the fastest way to tell whatever search bot what your website contains, right? You could also serve the same content to your end customer, and that end customer's front end would then hydrate this website so that the user can then interact with it, right? PWAs are one of the most ignored capabilities, right, that most of us can be doing. How many of you all have native apps for your actual native apps, like it's published on the Play Store or App Store? How many of you all, your companies have these native apps? And how many of you all have PWAs, like your websites are PWAs? All right, quite a few. My advice, if you don't have an app yet, maybe you're just using websites to get business done, well, it's just a POC stage or something, spend some time making your website offline capable, right? If you have capabilities like offline support, you have capabilities like push notifications. Did you know you do not need a native application to be able to send push notifications to your users? Spend some time talking about PWS to your engineer. If you're an engineer, spend some time researching it. I am telling you, you do not need to build an app and publish it to be able to unlock new markets.
What is PWS?
Progressive web apps. I'm sorry, but yeah, good question. PWAs are progressive web apps. These apps, you can open them just like any other website on your browser, right? They have the ability, like if you code it well, you get an option to install this app as an app, right? So it shows up on your home screen as an app. It gets its own icon. There's a manifest file that allows you to control a lot of features. But when installed via this route, right, the user may close their browser, tap on this app, and it again open up your website inside of an app-like feature, right? Most platforms do support it. I think iOS had held out for a really long time but I think by now they are also supporting it. This is a good way to explore building apps and seeing, unlocking your customers. A lot of you may have some internal dashboards for your end users, right? So some of us have like what, 100, 200 users, right? They're well-paying customers, but your investor might be saying, hey, why do you want to invest time and energy in building a brand new app, right? Across so many platforms, etc. While React Native, Flutter are a good alternative to build a unified app as well. You could explore this if you already have a website that works, right? It's one of the fastest ways to launch an app and delight your users, right? I also call this the land and expand strategy. This is something that I learned during my time at Atlassian. They used it for another thing, but I would say you can land in the phone of your customers, delight them, right? And then expand onto, maybe asking them to install your app for maybe more features, right? So, yeah. Again, I think we covered this in the previous session, so I will not talk too much about this, but a lot of us have not yet explored this. I was late to the AI game. I felt like AI could probably never do the kind of code I did, right? Which is true to some extent, I as in any developer, right? But then, like Karthik was talking about, treat this as your pair programmer, treat this as your keyboard. Tell it what to do, see what it has generated, test it out, right? Make some fixes, and you are ready. This enables your developers and you to do higher order thinking. You can now focus on the business problem at hand. A lot of developers that I interview today talk about the amazing technical things they have done. Oh, we migrated from this to that, and this was a challenge, etc. Many of them still do not understand the problem they were solving for their employer. If your engineer is always inside of the code bus, right? I would say they are probably not getting enough time. You probably may have to spend $19 a month, for example, if you were to go with GitHub Copilot. They haven't paid me for, just for clarity. But if you end up doing that, you end up unlocking the potential of this developer who I'm assuming you're paying much more than 19. I hope you're paying much more than $19 a month. So 19 is no cost, right? It enables their productivity. So next time your developer, right, asks you for such a thing, give it to them. $19 is a lot, no doubt. It's amazingly high, right, for a subscription for an Indian user. I would say think about it like a business. $19 is nothing when compared to all the other things that you gain out of this, right? And if your developer hasn't asked for it yet, give it to them. Give them a few months. Bring them to, I think some tutorials, etc. Maybe a hackathon where people are working with these things. I think the previous demo kind of blew me. I'm going to go, and now I had this slide before, but I haven't done a lot of, a good job of enabling my own developers. We have the option to use it. I am going to go back and ask all my developers to look at demos like that and understand the kind of problems they solve, right? And hopefully we can supercharge our developers and ourselves with these tools, right? One very important thing that I want to talk about, again, a lot of people do not spend time on this, is observability. Make sure you try to instrument analytics in any new feature that you build, right? Analytics is something that always comes as an afterthought. I mean, even in the biggest organizations that I've seen, a lot of people think about analytics just before launch. Hey, what kind of metrics are we going to track? Oh, let me spend some time, instrumenting these things, talk to the analytics team and do it. My advice, during product stages, during your grooming sessions, make sure you think about all of these metrics that you want to track as part of your product, right? And if possible, and I would highly advise, look at tools like LaunchDarkly, add feature flags to any new feature that you release. It helps you ship code faster. A feature flagged feature, right, that you probably don't want going live, sometimes ends up being a stale code. So if you started coding a feature today and you want it to be launched 3 months later, the code that is written today, if it gets launched 3 months later you try to merge the PR, and there are 10, 20, 30 conflicts that you have to look at. It's going to be a big problem, right? What I have learned working at all of these organizations is the most productive workflows involve having feature flags. These feature flags allow you to merge your code early on. It keeps going to production, it is just not working, right? Feature flags, when turned off, do not cause disruptions to your existing workflows if implemented rightly. Hopefully, your developers will implement it rightly. But whenever you want to turn this feature on, after 3 months, let's say, right? After 3 months of hard work, you want to turn this on, you don't want it to go as a big bang, right? You want to turn it on maybe for an internal cohort of users, just to make sure it works well, right? Follow that up with making sure you release it to maybe some, I don't know if you all have beta users, etc., right? This is for mobile apps, you will have beta users. But even on web, you can easily control it for, let's say, 1%, 5%, do a progressive rollout. Make sure this feature does not cause large outages for you, because, I mean, we all know when you're doing a SaaS, when you're doing a company of your own, you do not want bad publicity. The moment you have something like this, you are in control of turning these features off. You do not have to take another deployment in case something goes wrong as well, right? So make sure feature flag is something you all are doing, your developers are doing. This is an important thing I want most of you all to start implementing if you don't already, right? And obviously, when you start measuring and having feature flags, your feature decisions are not based on hunches, right? I think this will work, let's try it out. Maybe you have somebody else who's thinking this may not work. Do not pull your rank, right? Make sure you have data to back out which one will and will not work, and you can do this easily via experimentations, etc. All of those possible via tools like LaunchDarkly or any other tool that provides you feature flags, right? I'll skip transpilers for now. I just wanted to make sure we all spend time. A lot of us know that the landscape has changed. I want to remind all of us, make sure your projects are migrating from the world of JavaScript to TypeScript. Make sure you have type safety built in, and no, TypeScript does not mean you can use any and say, okay, we have moved to TypeScript. Any is a tool, a keyword that you add just to avoid getting caught by TypeScript. TypeScript brings type safety to your applications. Make sure you use it the right way. This way you are able to leverage all the features that type-safe languages give you as well, right? If you're in Android, make sure you try and move on to modern languages like Kotlin. iOS, obviously Swift. I think most of us are doing Swift these days. Anybody still doing Objective-C here for their iOS applications? No. I think that was the fastest move. Android, I still see a lot of people using Java, but iOS was the fastest move. All right, I'll let you all go for lunch, but quickly, I wanted to chat about one thing. Make sure your engineers are now looking at WebAssembly, right? It has been around for really long. It has been unlocked now for almost all modern browsers. WebAssembly allows you to run binary-ish code in your browsers, right? So if there are heavy computations that you did not want to do previously on your JavaScript, right? You can now leverage WebAssembly code to do all of these hard calculations on your clients, on your users' client-end devices, right? This is something not a lot of people are using. This is something that is going to be a game changer. A lot of these modern run X on your browser, run Y on your browser kind of tools are now using WebAssembly. Make sure you explore that. Device processing powers, like I previously said, are increasing exponentially, right? The kind of things that are now possible, Apple has made all of that AI that we are used to logging onto the internet for, saying that we are now going to have it offline enabled, right? So the kind of power these chips hold is amazingly high. Make sure to leverage that. One more thing that I want you to think of while you look ahead for your apps is the way this world is going to consume all of these our products is changing rapidly, right? I know that we all have heard about the metaverse and all of these VR and AR applications. Make sure you start empowering your users, your developers today. I'm not talking about users right now. This is the part where I say, empower your developers to learn and start doing some POCs, something, right? Anything that relates to it. Do these things. All the large organizations have an entire team working on these things. You can spend a weekend spending time trying to understand what is it, what can our product do to be relevant in the times of VR and AR, right? It is something that I want, that is close to me. With that, I'll probably, okay, I don't know what that blank slide was. But yeah, you can connect with me on Twitter, Sunny Gupta. I'm a big fan of what the folks at Peerlist are doing. That's my profile on Peerlist. Go sign up. It's a no fluff social networking, professional networking platform. Social networking is my Twitter. But Peerlist is again close to heart. The founders are friends. And I think they're trying to avoid what LinkedIn couldn't. So let's see, fingers crossed. Thank you. I'll be around. Sure.
What are the alternatives of launch darkly in front end? So if suppose not everyone will be able to afford.
Sure.
So in backend there are many ways. Like AWS itself have the app config which you can use. But front end, I've not seen some like free of use good frameworks to control the feature flag. So do you have anything on mind?
Launch darkly, for that matter, allows you to do all of these things.
No,
and launch darkly is.
If suppose I can't use launch darkly because we can't pay or whatever.
Understood.
Reason.
Yeah, fair enough. A lot of people do have their own in-house config management, right? So I'm assuming you have some CDN.
Yeah.
Right? You have a CDN, have a config file, right? It's at the end of the day, it's just a simple JSON, right? Have a JSON, have an internal dashboard where you have all of these keys created, have a true false value or whatever value you want, right? Expose that as an end API, put it in front of a CDN.
This is what we do currently, so I was just checking.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the probably best ways to do it. Unless you want to do a rebuild and deploy, but then if you're doing that, you're negating all of the benefits that feature flagging brings you. So yeah, okay. And all I would say is the moment you change anything, you will have to manually purge the cache of this JSON that you get, right? The moment you do that, you have the new config available to all your users.
Got it.
So yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah.
Where you want your developers and engineers to follow. I was not in the last session, so I was somewhere else. So can you explain that and what's the use? So we
saw Karthik do a demo of of GitHub Copilot, and one of the most interesting things that I saw was their LLM was able to understand the entire that entire organization's code base and could answer questions specifically when asked in a business context. So he asked, hey, how can somebody apply, I forgot the exact question, but how can somebody log into this website? And it would tell you, you would have to go here, there's a button here, this is the function that gets called, etc. So all of those things now are possible, right? And as a result, this ends up unlocking so much, right? For example, I am a late night programmer. Unlike, again, in the previous session, he was saying, we are a myth, but I am not a myth. I like to program at nights. I would sit there like a hacker, do my things, right? At that point, if I get a doubt, hey, how does this thing work? Or, where can I find, how does, let's say, personalization in my website works, right? I can just ask it to this pair programmer, to this copilot, right? And it would point me to the right direction. Now that unlocks me having to wait till the next stand-up and having to ask somebody who probably knows about it better than me. So stuff like that.
One example I give because I've used
yeah.
a lot of duplication you can avoid. Sometimes when your company grows, a lot of teams write a similar kind of code. Actually, it can help you because it knows the complete context. It can tell you that this code is already written somewhere.
I love that example, the accessibility you mentioned when we do some multitasking. I remember one of my customer, right? He used to attend in the meeting only when he's commuting.
Understood.
Okay, so is there any specific tool you can recommend to test the application in terms of accessibility?
There are two popular tools that I know. One is called Axe. The second one is called Pally, P-A-11-L-Y, I think, Pally. Both of these tools are used. There is no tool that will give you 100% certification saying you are accessible or not, but right? There are, it will look at your website and tell you, hey, you're not using semantic HTML. Sometimes it may tell you that, hey, you have no alternative text for any of these things, etc. Right? But at the end of the day, you will have to do some field testing. Maybe try and listen to your website from a screen reader. It's one of the easiest things that you can do. The moment you do that, you'll realize, hey, it is first talking about this, then it is jumping here, then it is jumping there, right? Maybe I need to fix this, right? That is not something a tool will be able to.
Some people are comfortable with using the mouse, and some people with the keyboard.
Right.
So the customer, no, they're asking, I need keyboard based, not mouse. So just to manage.
So there are these things, like I said, right, you need to create a checklist of what kind of people you want to support. You can take the help of Google Bing to first identify the kind of personas there are, right? Then see, you want these many people to be able to access it. Create a checklist of what your website needs to convey to all of these users and make sure it gets done, right? It will require some manual testing. There are agencies which do this for you as well. So you may have to engage them. But one single tool to rule them all, I haven't found one yet. We use a plethora of tools together so that we are able to gauge how well our website is doing or not.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, Sunny, good talk, Jay here. I think you kind of touched the topic that I actually wanted to ask. One of the key things that the answer that I'm looking for, or your thoughts, is in terms of speed and time. Sometimes what we do is, these enterprise customers, especially where the accessibility is a concern and it is a necessity. And what happens is, you develop the accessibility in your components. So the entire front end actually takes a lot of time building the components to make sure that it is reusable. And one of the very simple things that I found, which a lot of customers ask, is the color branding. Which actually becomes much trickier. So from the testing point of view, it's completely manual. So I wanted to ask, at what strategy or what time do you think that a component has to be built from your own front-end engineers with accessibility, because the testing is entirely manual. It's a very lengthy process. Even the 6 months is very less compared to your application scale. Even if it's a minimum application, it's a 1+ years. So how do you put a strategy around where you have to incorporate accessibility, build components, and test, and also scale it at the same time?
This is from a startup or young company point of view, you would say?
Let's say this is a company which moves away from a monolithic architecture and starts targeting enterprises.
Understood. Yeah. Two approaches that come to mind immediately. I don't have a silver bullet here, but one thing that I would advise is there are open source design systems out there which are accessible, right? Maybe make use of them or fork them out, create your own on top of them. You do not need to reinvent the wheel every time, right? So try and make use of these, because if it's a hard requirement from your clients, right? Sometimes you're in an industry which is regulated well enough, so your client may or may not want it, but maybe the government mandates that a tool like this needs it, right? At that point, you will have to begin with something that already has these accessibility aspects baked in, right? And then you build over that. In parallel, you can have, and maybe you're somebody who is a design aficionado, wants a really completely unique offering altogether, right? In parallel, you can have your own team start to extend either this or build upon what this library provides, and go from there, right? But hard work is hard work, right? Either somebody else has done it for you or you do it. I haven't tried AI for trying to get accessibility done. I'm not sure how well it would do, because there's not enough public example for accessible websites out there, which is why I think it would probably struggle. But again, it has surprised me time and again. So yeah.
In my experience, I think DQ and AxDev. Those are the only two tools. Rest of the other, they don't even come close. So it's mostly manual. If you have to do NVDA, screen reader, whatever these tests, the max that you can do is, use a Cypress test to see all the violations.
Correct.
And when you're creating VPAT report, you would have to get the violation. And I think so far it's only manual. There are hardly any tool, one integrated solutions for this.
This is the problem I faced at every other organization that I've worked at. There are companies which are making advantage of this and are saying that, hey, we charge you this much and we'll give you a score and we'll tell that you're certified. But at the end of the day, real customers will know if they're able to use it or not. So, which is why it ends up being a lot more manual than we would prefer it to be.
And the funny part is, some of the customers wouldn't prefer to do business, or they can't do it because they would lose government contracts if they don't have this.
Exactly, and which is why there are checklists. So there is A rating, AA rating, AAA rating. As long as you are compliant with those, these clients should ideally not have problems, right? So as long as you check those boxes in the checklist that these lists provide, it should be fine.
Thanks. Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Hey, hi. Yeah, it's a wonderful session, and you have listed all the needed latest front-end items here, which all the engineering leaders need to know. And my name is Jones. I'm working as a front-end architect. And one of the two questions I have.
Sure.
One of the challenge I face, as the front-end has evolved a lot in the last 10 years back, we used to have people who just write HTML, CSS, and minimal JavaScript, and people who from the back end needs to convert or make it to JSP, ASP, and they need to run it. And still, some of the same kind of a pattern is followed in some of the companies and some of the projects, and we do end up with repeated HTML codes, which should not be written in that way, which needs to be written in a reusable component. So have you faced this kind of a challenge, and how you overcome this, and how you made it a better code? That's my first question. And second is the observability. Like, what is the tool you have used in your experience to measure this web vitals after every release? We need to compare with our previous web vitals, like all this Lighthouse, which we need to manually do, or you have any tools you used and you can suggest?
Understood. So the first part of your question, let me first try to address that. If you have this monolith where JSP and everything is being used, and people end up writing repetitive code, the only solution is discipline, right? Or maybe these days, as somebody was telling, AI can look at patterns and say, hey, you know what, this exists elsewhere in your code base, you could just have imported that, right? But I think it's just about having a lot of discipline in those engineers. But anybody still doing that kind of development, development in those areas, some people having those projects in maintenance makes sense, right? But if you're still doing active development in these projects, I would say it is time you start thinking about the migration project altogether, because I have spent time in a couple of places. My first job was where I was migrating a JSP, ASP.NET project from being a completely monolithic to a SPA. So I started my career transitioning out of something that was probably the biggest PETA for my employer at the point, right? And second, what was your second question? How to measure these web vitals. Two ways. I think Google has its own tool. You can just go in there, put your website, and it will tell you performance over the past few days, right? I think Webmaster Tools has access to that as well, and you can directly do it for any website. Chrome also has this developer mode, inside of which there are options for you to control network conditions, control a lot of these things, and test it out in real time. You can actually, a lot of people have some device farms where they actually run this to get those numbers for builds that have not yet gone public. Because if you use the online tools, what you're going to get is what the field is seeing for a build that is already out there, right? You can get the values for those. But if you want to do a developer testing, I think Google Developer Tools has these.
Yeah, these we
inbuilt.
need to do it manually, but I mean, we started using Sentry, and I have heard about Neuralink here. So like this, any other tools we used, and did it in an automated way, like every release, like we can compare.
I mean, Browser Stack and a bunch of these tools exist. I tend to steer towards open source or avoid having to call out companies, except for one company that I called out at the start. But outside of this, I feel all of these tools, right? Browser Stack, Neuralink, Sentry. I've used most of them. I'm forgetting the name, but there was one. I'll find that out and share with you. This chap from India has built. I was using it at one of my previous startups. We were just looking at all of our user journeys, all of that, screen recordings for some users, just to help them debug issues, etc. But yeah, I mean, it's a great opportunity for anybody to launch a SaaS in as well. I think everybody wants to measure what their users are doing on the website and what can they do better, which areas to focus on, etc. Those are tools that are by the dozens. So yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Take the last question,
Yeah.
and then we'll wait for lunch. Yeah.
I'll be around after that as well. We can just huddle after that, but yeah.
Yeah. So I have a question from the engineering perspective.
Sure.
So Jio recently launched, couple of years ago, launched the small phone, the old phones which we used to have, and the Jio Cinema also runs on that phone, as well as like a couple of other apps. Now with the modern frameworks, what trend I have observed that developers as well as a lot of people, they do not give a lot of consideration on the client side memory. I have seen like the GitHub tab also takes 200 megabytes often, and there are even the ChatGPT tab I have seen taken a gigabyte of RAM sometimes. So how have you optimized the front end of these applications to fit in such a small device? Because I would prefer to have a like smaller phone where I had the apps I need, so that they have a like very minimal footprint of binary which can be installed on that.
Understood. Very interesting question. Also because this is my second stint with a Reliance company. I was, before Atlassian and before ThoughtSpot, I was with JioMoney. And another one thing that we were doing at the time was development for KaiOS. KaiOS is this OS that runs on these Jio phones, right? I think these phones have decent amount of memory to be able to support a React app as well. So most of the apps that I have built for that are just React apps. You have to be mindful of the kind of things you want to import. Importing 10 different libraries just for getting one thing done is not something that you have as a luxury. But I think you should be doing that same thing for your browser-based websites as well. Do not take it for granted in that sense, right? But I have in the past also written vanilla JS pages just for some of these lower end devices as well. So it's going to be a mixture of what you want to be done, right?
Isn't there any underlying technologies, for example, the optimizations of importing less things? That is something which I'll probably also do for the web app as well, if I were to reduce its memory footprint. But I would probably want a much lesser memory footprint from web app on a mobile app. Probably
I mean, there are tools like React and stuff. Like by now, React has also taken from that, and people do share around in these open source libraries. But smaller and smaller frameworks, right, end up just removing capabilities that are not used as much, right? And so in that case, you use things like tree shaking, right? I mean, I'm not saying these things because these are now, I skipped the slide on transpilers. By design, I saw the crowd and I was like, okay, most of these people are doing all of these things. And these transpilers, these script runners are going to tree shake your code base, right? So anything that is actually not used ends up being removed from your final bundle. And if you still feel the problem, remember that vanilla JavaScript still exists, right? All of these frameworks are just vanilla JavaScript packaged together with some boilerplate code, right? So sometimes you may want to take the first principles, see what you want implemented, just implement that and go ahead, right? Yeah, so we can talk more about this and my experience doing these things once we meet outside. But thank you, everybody.